I'm going to say good morning. There are people still joining, but I think we'll kick off. We'd like to kick off reasonably on time, so it's just gone 10:30. And Fiona, if you want
I'm
to.
here. I'm trying to turn on my camera, but you might be able to turn it on, Jerry. A minute now. No joy.
Do. Still waiting for your video.
Yeah, I can't turn it on. It won't. I don't have the option. I could turn it off, but I can't turn it back on again. Okay, if you take away control of your screen for a second, Jerry, and I'll probably be able to turn the camera on then.
Okay.
And then we can.
Okay, try that.
Yeah, actually, perfect. No.
Okay.
Great. Yay, we're here.
Hey. We have the technology. Okay, good morning and welcome everybody. I think we have quite a big crowd today. And this is going to be a joint event with myself and Fiona. Fiona is our senior research analyst, and she has read NIS2 at least twice. You know, Fiona it was who had, I tell people, had a dog-eared copy of GDPR by the time it was published. So by the time we have a national law for NIS2, more about that in a moment. I'm sure Fiona's copy of NIS2 will also be dog-eared. So I'm going to pass over to Fiona. We're going to have a tag team on this today. We're going to speak for about a half an hour, and we're going to give you guys a chance to ask questions. We don't know if we'll have all the answers, but we'll do our best to take your answers. So Fiona, over to you.
Oh, okay. So I'll take it from here. Just a little bit about us for those of you who might be joining us for the first time. We're a group of experienced risk and compliance professionals who created a software called calQrisk. And calQrisk homes a series of GRC software solutions and services from financial services, public sector, not for profit. You can see there our client base is quite wide, and we're headquartered in Ireland. So our head office is in Shannon, and a lot of us work remotely. So I work in Limerick, and there are others up and down the country, and we have some people in the UK also. So that's about us. And okay, so here's our agenda for today. So it's a very high level overview of what NIS2 is, because we decided very early on that we couldn't possibly give you all the detail in 45 minutes. So we're going to speak at the end about deep dive webinars that we'll do as follow-ons. And if you have any ideas about that, you can certainly contact us. But for today, what is NIS2? Who does it apply to? So are you in scope or not? How can you demonstrate compliance? How can you do your reporting? And Jerry and I then are going to chat about how you could take steps to achieve compliance. Okay. So I took a leaf out of Jerry's book. Jerry's loves to add quotes. So I've added one, and it's from Jim Langevin. And Jim is he's a former US congressman. He's a leading voice in cybersecurity. He authored the US National Cyber Director Act, which led to a National Cyber Director being put into the White House. So obviously that was a few years ago. We're in a different place now, but effective cybersecurity is not a product, but a process. So it's not the ISO 27001 that you're buying certification for, but it's a process that starts at the top. It starts in the boardroom with the senior management team and filters down through the company. doing good risk management. Now, so what is NIS2? It's well, it's a EU directive first and foremost, so it comes directly from Europe, but it's not directly applicable at a national level. So each of the 27 states have to transpose it into their national framework, their national legal framework. Currently, I think the last report was, I think there were only 7 or 8 countries who currently have that done out of the 27. So Ireland has been fined already, and there's no sign of it happening yet, but I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a minute. But NIS2 is part of a wider digital security framework across the EU. So we have NIS2. Some of you might be familiar with DORA. There's the EU Cybersecurity Certification Scheme, that's for cloud services. There's a Cyber Resilience Act and the Cyber Solidarity Act. Now, as of today, only NIS2 and DORA are in force. The other 3 are still at proposal stage. So there'll be lots more about cybersecurity coming down the road to you over the next months and years. So what is NIS2 as a directive? Well, right there in the title, its aim is for a high common level of cybersecurity across the EU, and like any other supranational initiative, it's to ultimately to enable the market, to reduce friction in the market and enable business to go ahead across states, so that we here in Ireland can be confident that we're dealing with Croatian companies, that their cybersecurity is going to be at a similar level to our own. It speaks to the member states, so it speaks to the it doesn't speak to the organizations directly at directive level. So the member states must adopt national cybersecurity strategies. So all of this going on in the background in Ireland. They must designate and establish competent authorities. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Cyber crisis management authorities, single points of contact, and computer security incident response teams. Now, and that's in the singular at a national level. In Ireland, it's the National Cybersecurity Centre. It's already established. It's got loads of guidance on its website. It's got lots of updates, tips. So I would recommend visiting that website to get a better idea about Ireland's take on the NIS2. Obviously, then member states must carry out supervisory and enforcement obligations. So there's, as I said, there will be at least 9 competent authorities across the state who will be supervising and enforcing the obligations on organizations. The cybersecurity risk management measures, they're if you want to go and have a look yourself, they're in Article 21. They're not, so they're not prescriptive, but they tell you what's expected. So you need policies on risk analysis and information security, incident handling, business continuity, and there are rules then and obligations on cybersecurity information sharing and how to do your reporting. And Jerry's going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to move on to, sorry, I'm controlling Jerry's screen. It's a little bit tricky. So what is NIS2? I guess this is sort of a nutshell. Okay, so there's risk management, and I spoke on a panel there a few weeks ago, and I would argue that risk management is across the entirety of NIS2. It's all about cybersecurity risk management, reducing risks both in your own organization and coming in from third parties, taking an all hazards approach. Now, an all hazards approach means, your risk vectors could be coming through the internet, they could be walking in your front door, they could be sitting at desks in your organization. So you've got to consider, the people risks, the process risks, as well as the technology risk. Corporate accountability, this is a big one because, as I said a little while ago, tone from the top, the senior management team is accountable and can be, they're punitive measures for the organization and the C-suite if the cybersecurity measures aren't up to standard, but aren't up to the task. So they must approve the cybersecurity measures. They must maintain oversight of the implementation of those measures and ensure ongoing compliance and application of the technical and organizational measures for compliance. And if that doesn't happen, then there are liabilities, as I said, and punitive measures, which include fines. They're a little bit sensational, like those for GDPR were, but I think more serious is that the CEO can be removed from their office temporarily, or the organization can be asked to cease operations temporarily until such time as their measures are brought up to standard. Business continuity, again, crisis management, what to do if something happens, getting your plans in place, your policies in place, your people in place, so that everybody knows what they're doing when an incident occurs. And then the reporting obligations, as I said, Gerard will speak a little bit more about that in a minute, but how to identify what to report, the sequence of reporting, and the timescales involved in that reporting, which are very specific. So here, so what is NIS2? As I said, it's an EU-wide initiative. At a national level, we're going to have this National Cybersecurity Act. Now, it was due on the 17th of October, 2024. As I said, it didn't happen. It hasn't happened. It's still sitting in the Oireachtas, not moving at the moment, as a big document, heads of bill. There's over 168 pages in it. I've pulled a little bit out of it this morning. As I said, we could be here till next Tuesday speaking about it. But what I want to talk to you about is the national competent authorities. So who will be monitoring you as an organization, and who will you be reporting to? So if you're in the energy, drinking water, wastewater sector, it'll be the Commission for the Regulation of Utilities. If you're in the communications sector, so digital infrastructure, as you can see there, ICT service management, space, digital providers, the Commission for Communications, so ComReg is going to be your competent authority. The Central Bank will be the competent authority for banking, financial markets. The Irish Aviation Authority for aviation, obviously, the Rail, Commission for Rail, Minister for Transport for maritime, and the National Transport Authority for roads. Then this is the 9+, so an agency or agencies, whichever the minister decides, under the remit of the Minister for Health Services. And then the National Cybersecurity Centre, as I mentioned earlier, for all other sectors, which is set out in Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, so sectors of high criticality or other critical sectors, which I'll go through very quickly now. So sectors of high criticality. You can see here, this is an excerpt from the National Cybersecurity Centre and the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications. It's a dual publication. It's a NIS2 guidance document, so it's very worthwhile going to find that on their website. Anything that is encircled red is already covered by NIS. And actually, I should have said that. Just because NIS2 hasn't been transposed doesn't mean we're not being, our organizations aren't, don't have to be compliant at the moment. So if you're already captured by NIS, that's still in force until such time as it's superseded by NIS2. But the new sectors there are wastewater, space, public administration, and ICT service management. So business to business, people who provide you with your website, trust services, and all of that digital service. And then here in other critical sectors, most of this is new. So aside from digital providers, we have research, food production and distribution, manufacturing, waste management, postal and courier services, and manufacture, production, and distribution of chemicals. So these organizations who are in critical sectors, such that if there were to be a cyber event, a cyber disruption, it would cause significant risk to either the public or to other businesses. So that's the idea behind that. And to be in scope, you must be one of those sectors that I just described in Analysis 1 or 2, and a medium-sized enterprise with, and I've listed it here, so you've more than 50 or less than 250 employees, your turnover exceeds 10 million but doesn't exceed 50 million, and or your balance sheet totals 10 million annually and doesn't exceed 43 million. And if you exceed the medium-sized enterprise ceiling, then you're automatically in scope. And the other requirement then is that you're operating within the EU. So that means you're either providing services in the EU or your operations are fully within the EU. And that's it, that's me. And I'm going to hand over to Jerry now. Oh, and I just wanted to say one more thing, Jerry, sorry, before we move on.
Yeah.
And it's just about scope, that there are other very specific set of criteria that apply to organizations regardless of your size. So if you're a micro enterprise, you could be captured by scope. So have a look at the scope in the NIS2 documentation and see if you fit one of the very, lots of criteria there. And member states, of course, when the national legislation comes into play, they also have the power to name sectors and or organizations specifically in that legislation. So there, that's it. Over to you, Jerry.
Okay. Thank you, Fiona. And you might take a look. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A, so I don't know whether we'll handle them maybe at the end, unless you think they should be handled immediately.
I can't see them at the moment, you see, unless you take, do you want to take control away from me and I can do that?
Okay, just 1 second.
Great, got it.
Okay. I thought when I looked at NIS2, and I have a techie background, I thought there were 10 items that they listed out, 10 things you need to do for cybersecurity. And I thought, well, that's not a cybersecurity standard. But it read more like these are the areas that they've picked out for focus. So I thought I would do a comparison with 27001, which is a standard you can get certified to. And I thought maybe parallel to that, I would compare this with NIST2. And to my opinion, and it is my opinion, NIST2, it's not a requirement standard. It's actually, if anything, it doesn't tell you how to be compliant, but it tells you what. And NIST2 describes outcomes that you should be aiming for, but not tell you how to get to those. It has some examples, it does suggest things, but it's not prescriptive. So I use the NIST, if you like, framework, and I like the fact that in NIST2, not to be confused with NIS2, but NIST2, they added a function called govern, which is fantastic, because I've always felt it was missing in the NIST1. And the first thing that struck me when I do the comparison is that a lot of the things that are in NIS2 are positioned at the governance level. Now, Fiona said it once already, and we'll probably repeat it again. This is a senior management team initiative. They have to be seen to drive it. They have to be seen to, once one feels that, once the project is done, we're compliant with NIS, that's it. We can focus on the next project. But as Fiona in her quote said, it's not a project, it's a process. And yes, there is a little bit of work maybe to get it up to business as usual level. But you'll see in this training. I've training down at an operational level as well in this under Protect. But training is from the CEO right down to the, whatever the lowest level is in the organization, but anybody who's certainly has access to information, whether physically or electronically. And the need for that ongoing training, and that has to be known at the top. If you're CEO and you don't know that everybody has got cybersecurity training and is getting regular updates, then you're missing something. Third-party management. And again, like DORA, and I know that there's a percentage of you here today coming from the financial services sector, you will know that third-party risk management is a key element of DORA. It is for NIS2 as well. Your organization is an extended organization if you're relying on third parties to deliver a service. So take from this slide, first of all, governance is a big key of it, a big part of it. And that's policies, that's procedures, that's reporting as well on a, whether it's, in the beginning, maybe on a project might be weekly, but then monthly and quarterly basis, nominating somebody to drive this as well from the senior management team and report back. Under identify, certainly yes, identify your assets and identify vulnerabilities. And that's an ongoing thing. Now you'll see here that NIS2 doesn't talk an awful lot about threat intelligence and penetration testing. Not even enough. My legend here would be Y is strong guidance, a small y is maybe less so, but thin, and N, I couldn't find any guidance on it. But if you look across 27,001, you'll get some guidance, and certainly in NIS2 on how to do that. Again, NIS2 isn't telling you how to do it, but it's telling you what's important. I would say a lot of you have a lot of this already. And like everything, the first step is maybe to identify where you have gaps. They do put a lot of emphasis on the protect side as well, access control, multi-factor authentication. This is, we probably are all very used to it now, whether it's accessing our bank accounts or even in any application that now is remote, the advice is multi-factor authentication because it's not in your building. So, and again, awareness training. The other big thing that is picked out, and interestingly, is I'm going to anticipate a question. If you're certified to 27,001, would you be already compliant with NIS2 from a, let's say, security point of view? No, is the answer, because 27,001 doesn't really cover incident management and incident handling, to use the NIS2. For that, you'd have to add ISO 27035. That's in the family of 27,000, but it's focused particularly on incident management. And you can see the 27,001 itself is very thin on the ground in terms of incident management. And the other key thing that they pick out on this is that recovery planning, the business continuity plan, not just handling the crisis and the incident, but if it was a major incident and it's going to take you weeks and maybe months to recover, have you thought about that? And have you got a good business continuity plan? So yeah, it's high level, it's eminently doable, but you need to be doing a lot more really than this. So I think I've probably covered that. And on the next one, if I have control of my own, and we don't have the detail yet on significant incident reporting, but from what I have read, it's very like the DORA critical incident reporting. And this is a screen that we've produced, and actually this is only half of it, because for the critical incident reporting, there's an awful lot of information that the regulator, that the EBA wants to see. Now, I don't believe it'll be this extensive for NIS2, but it's the sort of thing, I want to give you a flavor of it, a lot of information to gather. And interestingly, the way it's structured is that as soon as, well, for DORA, when you have an incident, there's an initial report, but even for NIS2, an early warning, if you suspect something, they're looking for, like, as early as possible, an indication that something may be, something untoward may be happening. So the idea is multiple reports. So early warning, instant notification, it's happened, something has happened, you report minimum information, and then intermediate reports at the latest after 1 month, what the status is, and each report has more and more information on it. And what you're seeing here from DORA is literally just the initial reporting and I think 2/3 of the intermediate report. That will come out in finer detail of the national Cybersecurity Act, and you won't have to do it you won't need this level of detail, I'm sure. So now I'm going to ask Fiona to rejoin. And what we've picked out is 9 steps. We've just three more slides, folks. And we've picked up kind of 9 steps, things that you need to start considering if you're going to put together a project plan to try and address NIS2. And my feeling is, and Fiona, certainly you comment on this, that you may not be in scope today, but you may be in scope in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. And there's nothing in NIS2 from a requirement, certainly from a cybersecurity point of view, that you wouldn't consider and say, yeah, we should be doing that. But if you want to start, if you're not in scope, you can still start this, but without the urgency. If you are in scope, then what are you waiting for? So I would say the first thing is establish that applicability. Are you in scope? And are you in the critical, essential, or important category? Fiona and I were talking about this. She's mentioned it already, setting the tone from the top. This is something that has to be driven by the senior management team or it won't get done. And it won't be seen to be being done by the regulator. Fiona, yeah, would you agree? The senior management team driving this is the first step?
Absolutely. Yeah. They're legally required to to drive this within the organization. For sure.
And be seen to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And be seen to be. And like we had with GDPR, we have to be able to, prove it as well. It's not enough to do it.
And prove. I heard some years ago that the regulator generally slaps fines on people if they're not doing what their own procedures said they should be doing. Not that they don't have the procedure, but they're not actually following their own procedures. So have the procedures and the policies, but then do it. Adopt a risk-based approach. Now, risk-based kind of came into the vocabulary some years ago for lots of things. And it's another way of saying kind of focus on what matters. You can't do everything. But if you do a risk assessment, the whole idea of doing a risk assessment and ranking risks is that the biggest risks bubble to the top. And you should be addressing the biggest risks. So identify the NIS2 requirements, conduct a risk assessment, set an appetite, what's acceptable to you, and know what's acceptable, and then start addressing the gaps. What is your strategy? What is your action plan? Fiona, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I haven't run these questions by Fiona. I thought I like her
spontaneity is key.
Spontaneity, but what would you say are the top 3 requirements if you were identifying this? Where would you start in trying to focus on what matters?
Okay, so after you've identified what you need to do, you need to, as you spoke about, Jerry, you need to where are your biggest risks according to the requirements of NIS. And scarce resources, we have scarce time, money, and people, so we need to figure out where they would be best spent. One really important thing, and it's encompassed in the risk assessment piece, it's the setting, and in the setting the tone from the top is establishing the objectives. What do you want to be? Do you want to be best in class? Do you want to just comply? Do you want to what is your objective in doing this too? What then are your risk criteria? So it's really important that the whole organization is singing from the same hymn sheet, that somebody in one department is quite risk tolerant, and they're assessing those risks at different levels. So make sure the criteria are common across the whole organization.
Okay. Thanks for that. A big one in NIS2 is the supply chain, and I said it in the introduction. I see the supply chain and third parties as just an extension of your organization. But some years ago, I worked for a company who went into examinership, and we had to write to all our suppliers, and I was shocked to see that we had something like 800 suppliers. If you ever want to know, just ask the finance department for their list of who to pay money to. But you don't have 800 important ones. So you got to focus on the ones that are supporting, I suppose, your critical operations, as in DORA. You can take a lot of lessons from how DORA approached this. But you need to, I mean, if you're starting off, you do initial due diligence before you enter into a third-party agreement with somebody. But for most of you, I'd imagine that it's, well, that horse is bolted. But doesn't mean to say you can't do anything. You should be doing an ongoing due diligence, and maybe you should be asking questions you should have asked before you signed a contract. And maybe there is an opportunity before that contract gets renewed for you to do due diligence again. My question, I suppose, for Fiona, how do you keep it focused? How do you focus from the 800 down to the, I'm going to say 18 that might be important, or 8? Have you any tips?
I'll refer you back to point number 2, Jerry, risk-based approach. So what's going to cause the most disorder in your organization to your customers? If their service level either stops or is encroached in some way by a cyber event.
Okay, that's sound advice. Okay, and here you go again. You could give that answer maybe to a few of these. Keep it proportionate. And as I said, the risk-based approach, you can't do everything. So mitigate the risks, mitigate the most significant risks. And this has been around for years as well. The technical and operational measures. This, I think, first came into my vocabulary around GDPR. And I remember thinking, I've been at a few conferences and people were asking what are appropriate TOMs, policies, procedures, and how much and how many do we have to do? And the answer was always appropriate. Only you can say what's appropriate. Fiona, I don't know if
I'm nodding in agreement. Yeah.
Yeah. What's maybe it's critical, essential, and important. Maybe that might direct. I mean, if you're critical, you probably set the bar a bit higher, would you? How do you differentiate? Yeah.
Well, if you're critical, then you're going to have to maybe do the belts and braces approach. But if you're not, if you're further down, if you're important, you may reserve the braces and just go with the belt. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to keep it proportional. Nobody's expecting you to spend an absolute huge budget if it's not necessary. So proportionality, risk-based approach. Keep that at the forefront of your project planning and implementation.
Okay, thanks. Incident management, and I've done certainly enough webinars that it's for a number of you probably tired listening to me saying have a plan, because if you don't have any plan and you have an incident, then you're already losing. You don't have time to start putting things together when you have a major incident. And indeed, as part of that, okay, I hope I'm still there. Okay. Don't be surprised. I mean, continuous monitoring of the environment is important, so that whether it's the environment, somebody in your sector has been attacked, you could be next. These attacks often go sector by sector, so certainly be aware of what's happening around you. Be ready to respond and have everybody trained in that response. And the best training I've found you can do with an incident plan is a scenario, desktop exercise, because untested plans are, shall we say, I won't say worthless, but you'll get huge value with every test. Fiona, if I can throw one at you on this. I think all agencies, when I read this, I think it's all the agencies, the competent authorities. I think this is aimed at them as much as the organizations, that they're looking at a higher level. They've got a broader view and they can advise the organizations that they're supervising. I mean, what's your take on that? Will they share that information, do you think? Do you see that happening, that these agencies will, I don't know, be part of that sharing?
Yeah, sorry, Gerard, I missed the first.
Okay, we seem to have lost Fiona. All right, I'll say what I think. I think if the 7 or 8 agencies, competent authorities that we're relying on, that I think these agencies, and I'm saying, Fiona, I think the agencies will be gathering information, and I'm hoping sharing the information with the organizations. I just wondered if you saw it that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why there's a
Okay.
single, there's a single source of truth established at national level, who gathers up all the information and then reports it up to the EU, where bigger decisions will be made in the wider cybersecurity strategy.
Yeah. Part of that, I suppose, sharing of information is the incident reporting, and the more incidents you report, the more information that is being passed up from the, if you like, from the grassroots. That will inform certainly strategic decisions at a higher level. The computer security, internet or information response teams, incident response teams, they're the ones who are collecting it from many sources. I know in DORA that there is an encouragement, they're encouraging organizations to share information with each other. You can't force people to share their dirty linen, if you wish, with their competitors. But certainly these competent authorities can share that information. I'm a firm believer in learning from incidents. And I think there's a desire to capture information. But Fiona, have you any inkling as to who's going to take the lead here on the incident reporting? Is it the CSIRT or is it the National Cybersecurity? We seem to have a technical problem. Okay, every time I ask her a question, it seems to not want to give me. I'm going to move on because we just have a few minutes left. Okay, you're back.
I'm back. I don't know what's going on here. You were
don't press any buttons. Who do you think will take the lead on the incident response?
Sorry, in the organization or in the
no, in the of the organizations? Is that the National Cybersecurity Centre? Who will be gathering it?
They will be the CSIRT. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
The Cybersecurity Reporting Authority, I guess, and they will be reporting into Europe then.
Now, you said at the beginning with your quote that it's a process, not a project, and certainly there is probably a project to get you up to a certain level, but once you are at that business as usual level, you need to have that process of continually reviewing, I suppose, the measures you've in place, the technical and operational measures. She just doesn't want to answer any of my questions. But you got to, you report the instance, you review the instance. Is there something you could do better? Audits, whether it's an external audit coming in, looking at your systems, you review, see where the weaknesses are and corrective actions. My question, and I don't know if this is a fair one for you, Fiona, but what sort of things do you think will be changing that will require a response or reactive response? Why do we need to continually review and make changes?
Well, I guess first and foremost, and it might be obvious, that the threats are changing all the time, becoming more and more, and you have it there, your threat environment, your threat intelligence. So, keeping your ear to the ground, training your people as to what threats are out there. With the onset of AI, they're becoming more and more sophisticated. The phishing attempts and the you're also relying on your third parties, so you can't just assume that they're going to keep doing what they promised they'd be doing on day one. You need to keep monitoring them and auditing them, and if it warrants that, of course, not just because.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Peter Drucker when I was learning management techniques. Peter Drucker, he said, "What gets measured gets managed." Isn't it so true? So you got to keep measuring it, guys. Communicate and share. And again, I think this is aimed, a lot of the NIS2 is aimed at national organizations. And I think this is aimed at competent authorities, primarily for them to share information between themselves and certainly between member states, but also within the sector. And again, DORA is pushing that as well, guys. Nobody knows everything. We need to share the knowledge, the wisdom, if you wish. Would you agree? Would you agree on that, Fiona? Yeah, the sharing.
Yeah.
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 Okay, I'm just going to go to the last one because I want to give people, we've got some questions that have come in. Cybersecurity training, this is last but not least. We said it at the beginning, and I'm a firm believer that the human is the weakest link still. In every single attack that you read about, there's been some phishing attempt or some human involvement, some social engineering that got somebody to do something that they shouldn't do or would normally not do. And it's kind of scary. I mean, would you agree with me, Fiona? The human is the weakest
Absolutely.
link, hence the training and
Absolutely.
hence the
Yeah.
focus.
Yeah. If you read the threat reports, read any of them, the Gartner, human error is always up there at the top
Yeah.
for breaches and other such things. Yeah.
And I think that's why NIS has pinned it both at the governance level that, you need to make sure it's happening as well as certainly operational level. So we have a couple of questions, I think, in the Q&A. And if anybody has, you can pop them in the chat or the Q&A. Which is better, the Q&A, is it?
Q&A, I think, because we can keep a better eye on it there. Yeah.
Okay, pop it into the Q&A, folks, if you would.
So there's two here that are sort of connected. So I'll start with the later one. Infrastructure circles were both ringed purple. So banking and financial markets in the annexes that I showed you. With DORA reference, what's the precise link to DORA? Is it working alongside in some way? So the short answer is yes, but they're not concurrent. They're working alongside in the EU cybersecurity strategy. They're both initiatives in that strategy. DORA is directly applicable at national level, directly from the EU to the organization. NIS isn't, needs to be transferred. The other thing is that DORA, even if you're fully compliant with DORA, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're fully compliant with NIS2. There may be other things that you need to do. So don't just take it. Like DORA is the what's called the lex specialis when it comes to NIS. So NIS will always be secondary to DORA. So if DORA says you must do something and NIS says something else, do what it says in DORA. But don't neglect NIS because there could be other things there. There's a question again. Public administration, is this sector further defined? Absolutely, absolutely, and very much so. So definitely read the small print in relation to public administration, because if you have a legal law enforcement mandate, then you might be exempt, but not necessarily. So it's not for me to say. You definitely have to read the small print. And again, when the national legislation comes out, you may very well be incorporated into scope. So if you're not today, you might be when the law is put in place. There's a question from Michelle: do credit unions come into scope for NIS2? Because credit unions are exempt from DORA until 2028. I would apply the criteria, Michelle. So if you have more than 50 employees and your assets are over 10 million, then by definition, unless you're explicitly exempt by the National Cybersecurity Act, you will be in scope for DORA, or for NIS2, I beg your pardon. So it's kind of wait and see to a certain extent. We can't say for sure today, but if you go by the criteria, you'll get a good idea of whether you are in scope or not. There's a question here: we have 15 staff with assets of 110,000. Does this mean we're outside the scope of NIS2? Again, in short, you're under the employee criteria, you're above the assets criteria, but you might be a micro enterprise and be in the scope of NIS2, depending on the service that you're offering. And if that service were to come under attack, and you had a business continuity incident, you couldn't provide the service, would that cause high risk to health and safety in the company? So without all the information, I can't answer that question.
I'll read
Jerry?
the next one if you like. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Eddie Kerwin's question, can you recommend the best place to keep yourself informed about threats?
I wouldn't go for one place, Eddie. I would have a number of sources, and I don't like to be, I suppose, to pin it on one, but certainly we get vulnerability reports on a regular basis from a few different sources. It depends on the equipment you have. Like we have a sonic wall, firewall, so we get threat notifications from them. We get threat notifications from Microsoft. I would say, depending on your environment, but don't get it just from one. Maybe something we're going to do a deep dive in a few areas, and maybe it's something that I can dig out and put a longer list up for people.
Talk to your competitors as well. Talk to your suppliers, because they have information too that you might not necessarily have thought about.
What documents or information should we get from key suppliers when doing our due diligence? Can I answer this one then? For Owen, what documents should we get? Again, I'll start with what Fiona's probably said 5 times today. Keep it proportionate. If a supplier is handling sensitive information on your behalf, then certainly there's more documents you probably want to see, like their information security policy, maybe vulnerability management, maybe some evidence of training. I think, we have a list of questions. We've certainly been asked over the years, particularly over the last 3 years, probably by customers in this area who have due diligence questionnaires. I've seen them from anything from 150 to about 450 questions. We've created our own list, kind of a default of about 100. But I would be looking for policies, maybe looking for some evidence of, again, if it's a software as a service like we supply, we do at least annual, minimum once a year penetration test and vulnerability scan. And some customers ask us for that. Not everybody, but it's something we're willing to show as well. So keep it proportionate, because you don't want to annoy them either. So what if all services are outsourced, including Intergroup? You might outsource the service, but you don't outsource the responsibility. So you still have to do your due diligence. And when it's intra-group, this is a special, I would say, a special kind of case, because the regulator knows that if it's intra-group and still within the family of organizations to which you belong, how much pressure can you bring to bear for this services group to do what is right, especially if they're outside of the European Union and in a different jurisdiction? Treat them like a third party, and because if you're not, I think the regulator would say you can't just assume, because it's part of the same enterprise, that they're following the best practice. So I would say I would treat them the same as any other third party. Should be easier, because you should be speaking the same language. A company providing personal assistant services for people with disabilities for the HSE and other agencies, greater than 50 employees, 3 million turnover. Are we in scope? Fiona, can you see that one?
I'm not going to answer that question. Just looking at the numbers, I would say you're there, but I will direct you to the National Cybersecurity Centre website. They have a tool on there, so it's am I in scope? So I'm going to put the link in the chat, and you can go there and you can answer a set of questions, and I'm going to let the National Cybersecurity Centre tell you whether or not you're in scope. I'm just popping it into the chat for everybody to see now.
I'll let you do that, and I'm going to say, I think that's the last one in here. You've got the... Okay, so we're 5 minutes over the time, 45 minutes. Guys, we try to keep these to generally 45 minutes. And I'm just going to show you one last slide, and I'm going to ask you a question. We're thinking of another 4 webinars in this series and go deeper into the different areas. You know, risk management, that's our whole alma mater, isn't it? Supply chain risk management, or third-party risk management, and maybe the due diligence would cover under that. Incident management and reporting. And maybe by the time we do this deep dive, more clarity might be available as to what do you need to capture in terms of information. And then the appropriate TOMs, you know, what is an appropriate set of technical and operational measures. Now, if there's other topics that you feel within NIS that would be better or different, or add them on, we generally try to. We did this with DORA, and it was quite popular, where we went a bit deeper into different areas and tried to and answer more of the questions, try to anticipate the questions. So look, I'm going to say thank you for your attendance, and I can see that many of you stayed right to the end. So thank you for that, and thank you, Fiona. Fiona, as I said, she has, and you will notice she has delved deep into this and is good at answering very specific questions. So we continue the journey.